To the Real Estate Entrepreneurs Podcast. Today, we have a treat for you. We have a man that likes to fly airplanes, that likes to run tech companies, and he happens to also be a real estate investor. Rob, thank you so much for jumping in with me, brother. Can you tell us who you are, where you come from? Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, you got it, Ricardo. Number one, thanks for having me. This is going to be a fun conversation. We started off camera with a couple minute conversation that was already enjoyable. So I can only imagine that this is going to get better.
Amazing.
So a little background, Ricardo. I've been a real estate investor now for over 20 years. And I think of myself as a real estate investor, but I think of myself as a business guy. So
Let me hold on. Before you move forward, I want to touch up on that point.
Yeah.
And this is very important for me. Let's pretend for a second you are my full-time mentor, okay?
Yep.
And this is something that I've struggled with in the last probably couple of years.
Yep.
So I also come from, I am a real estate investor.
Yep.
But now I find myself doing more things,
Yep.
like yourself, that are related to real estate.
Yep.
But it's not necessarily real estate investing.
Yes.
How do you, a man with your experience, right? Because you've been going at this longer than I have. How do you differentiate the two? And
Yep.
well, like the identity is what I'm saying. Like I guess I'm having an identity crisis, if you will, right? Like, am I a real estate investor? Am I an entrepreneur? Am I this thing? Like, how do you differentiate that?
Yeah. So I'll answer that in a couple of ways, and I'll kind of take a few steps along the way with this answer. So number one, I think that any real estate investor is an entrepreneur in some capacity, because whether you have a full-time job, whether you're retired, or whether you're full-time in real estate, to do something outside of your job, outside of retirement, or to do something as an entrepreneur, you have to take action, right? An entrepreneur is someone that creates value and create something in the world. They're not sitting back and just consuming, they're creating. So number one, I think everybody that invests in real estate is an entrepreneur. Number two, I used to, and this was probably 15 or so years ago. And so I was in real estate for a little while already. And I was raising private money, and I had put a fund together, and I had millions of dollars worth of capital from outside folks that I was investing with. And I would sit down for breakfast, lunch, or dinner with some of my largest private lenders, the guys that were funding all of my real estate deals. And there was an aha moment that struck me one day that said, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be the rich real estate guy, and yet they're the ones that are putting up all the money. Like, yeah, I've got the skill, I've got the access to deals, I've got the understanding of how to structure this thing and make money with it and operate it successfully, but they have the money. And I recognized a couple of things. My wealthiest private lenders were in three predominant business categories. They were in publishing, they were in media, they were in software, and I guess a fourth one, they were in manufacturing. And so I stepped back and I tried to look at those four categories of business: media, publishing, software, and manufacturing. And I tried to ask, well, why is it that they have all of the money that they're funding all of my real estate deals with? And it really came down to scale. In those industries, they were able to disconnect their effort and their time from the results and the number of widgets they could go sell if they were in a market that was large enough, and if they had a product that served that market well, was infinitely scalable. And so, and that's what I saw with a lot of these guys. They they saw real estate as a vehicle that they needed to park their cash in. They needed some of the tax benefits from. They wanted the cash flow that, they wanted real estate to be covered by insurance, to pay them monthly, and to be a physical hard asset. And yet they were making all of their money not in real estate. They were parking their money in real estate for the long-term wealth building capacity. So, that's kind of a long way to answer your question. Like, how do I reconcile the two worlds? And it was when I saw that, and I was able to answer that question, why do they have the money and I'm supposed to be the rich real estate guy? I decided that I had to figure out how to continue using real estate to build my wealth and continue using real estate. But I had to figure out how to be more business agnostic and kind of say, I don't care if it's just investing in real estate. I'm a business guy and I want to be a business guy, and I want to go build businesses that produce the kind of money that I saw them producing to invest in my own real estate deals. So that was the process and the thing that got me there. If we back up even further, Ricardo, I was a normal guy that grew up in the Midwest. I was on the wrestling team. I was always kind of I don't want to say aggressive, but I was always like determined. I knew what I wanted and I was going to go get it. Right. And through college, well, from about the age of 15, I knew that I wanted to become an engineer. I had an uncle that was an engineer. I thought what he did was kind of cool. I didn't know what it meant, but on the first date with my wife today, at the age of 17, we went out to the mall and we were walking around the mall, and there was a Lincoln Mark 7 like sports car sitting in the center of the mall around Christmas time with, the rope kind of around it and this fancy car. And I said to her, someday I'm going to own something like that. And, she's a Midwest farm girl and she's like, oh, that's neat. And I'm like, no, I'm going to own that. And in my mind, I thought what that meant is that I was going to own an engineering company, become an engineer, start an engineering company, and that would allow me to buy this car that I thought was cool. And fast forward, I realized very quickly as I became an engineer, the guys that have the coolest jobs in the engineering company were the biz dev guys, the business development guys. They're the guys out with the expense account, going for breakfast, coffee, lunch, dinner, going to the ball games, doing all the cool stuff.
Getting fat on the company's credit card.
On the company's credit card. Yeah. And I was the guy sitting in the cubicle, staring at the computer screen, looking at spreadsheets and numbers. And I thought, man, I got to get to the other side. Well, what I realized then is, as I started to do not really business development, but I was an outgoing engineer, right? And all of the engineers listening, they're totally cool with me slamming engineers and saying that, they have no personality, because I'm one of you, right? So I got to a point where some of my clients were all real estate guys, and they were builders and developers, and, they were doing different kind of real estate deals. And I connected the dots. This was before I connected the dots with the private lenders, right? This is when I said, wait a minute, I'm billing hours and you're making millions. How do I get to the other side of the table? So from engineer to kind of sales and marketing business development guy, then from doing a little bit of business development with my clients to how do I get to the side of the table that they're on, real estate. That was my journey. And I didn't know how I was going to get into real estate. I thought it was going to be through development. I did that in the late 90s. I went under contract on a big parcel of land north of Denver.
So when did you start in the real estate business? Was it back then
So I started in 1998. And I went under contract on this first parcel of land, 78.6 acres.
Wow.
And Ricardo, I didn't know anything. but I had a somewhat natural gift to think, what do I need and what does the seller want? And how do I bridge the gap between the two to create a win-win that works? And so I didn't know about wholesaling back then. I didn't know about private money back then. I knew nothing. Like, I'm just an engineer, young kid that's going to figure this out. And I created a rolling option where
Now, you graduated as an engineer already by that time, or
yeah,
were you
yeah,
going to college?
yeah, I was an engineer.
What
Yep.
kind of degree do you have? Engineering
Civil.
degree?
Yeah,
Civil engineer. Okay,
Yep.
perfect. And that's what attracted you to building on the land, development,
right.
being a developer.
That's right. Yeah, it was civil and structural engineer. So that's why my clients were real estate guys, right? And so in this deal, I negotiated this killer deal, this killer contract, Ricardo. And the thing is, I didn't know that the contract had value. If I would have understood basic real estate money-making strategy back then, I could have flipped my contract, assigned it, probably put 6 figures plus in my pocket.
Wow.
But I didn't know. And so I made this amount of money on that deal. Zero.
Wow.
I made no money because I didn't understand exit strategy. And so I knew how to get into the deal, but I didn't know how to get out of the deal at the time without money, right? And so everybody talks about making money in real estate without money. That's true. I just didn't know how to do it. So I lacked knowledge at that time. If I would have had the knowledge, I would have walked out of that deal with a 6-figure payday. Fast forward a little bit.
Back then we didn't have YouTube either, or Google, or I don't know, some sort of educational platform to where we could have learned in 2 minutes, like we can today at our fingertips, how to flip a contract or how to make money from thin air.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if I could have back then Googled like how to make money on 78 acres of development land I have under contract, enter, it would give me like 6 videos today of exactly what to do, and the light bulb would have gone on. We had none of that. So yeah, it's kind of crazy. Well, if you fast forward from that deal, I got my taste.
So what did you ended up doing with that piece of land?
Here's what I figured. I ultimately canceled the contract and walked away. Yeah, I got my little bit of earnest money back. I canceled the contract and I made nothing, zero. And what that made me realize, though, is, okay, I got to figure, like, the real estate game is real. Like, I could see all the money to be made, but I also realized I lacked the knowledge. And so it turns out a little while later, my brother called me one day and says, "Hey, I saw this real estate event." He was out in the Bay Area of California at the time. He said, "Hey, I saw this real estate trainer. I just went to their live thing. It was amazing. I think you would really like it. They're going to be in Denver on this date. You should go." And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know." Well, I went, Ricardo. It was 7 p.m. Wednesday night, Denver Marriott, downtown. I had no idea what I was walking into. I didn't know the seminar business. I didn't know there was infomercials. I knew none of this, right? But I go into this event and I sit in the audience and I listen to this guy on stage teach how to do real estate. And I thought 2 things. Number one, I think I can do that because he's making it so simple. So simple. Like, I understand what he's talking about. And number 2, man, if I would have known this when I had that land deal, I could have actually made money. And so at the end of that 90-minute presentation on a Wednesday night, $1,600 later with my credit card, I was enrolled to go to their 3-day class. And at their 3-day class, I enrolled in their $22,000 coaching program. And understand, this is back in like 1999
now,
or 2000.
Who was the guy teaching? Like, who was the main figure?
Yeah, so it was through the Whitney organization, Russ Whitney.
Okay.
Yep. So I'm a product that went through the
Whitney. Just recently passed away, I think, last year, unfortunately.
Yeah, yep, exactly. It's sad, but yeah, I'm a product of that. And so here's what I did. I went to the classes. I knew nothing. I believed real estate was real, and so when I went and I learned, I left. I did not overthink. I just blindly took massive action. I had no idea what was going to happen on the other side of that action. I didn't know if I was going to stub my toe. I didn't know if I was going to have success, but I knew that if I took steps forward, even if I failed along the way, eventually I would ask questions and ask my way to success because I knew that other people were having success with real estate investing. And so there's no reason I shouldn't be able to have that same success. And so I just started taking steps forward. I learned, I applied, and I made $42,000 in 45 days of walking out of that seminar.
That's life changing money, especially back then.
Yep.
This is what, early 2000s?
Yep.
What was the average salary for somebody a year? Like, I mean, how much money were you making as an engineer?
Yeah.
A year, right?
Yep. So, I had not a bad gig back then. So I was making, I think, about $80,000 a year.
Still, that's half your check.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
and they didn't withheld any Medicare or FICA or anything like that, right? So you got the whole shebang, and you're like, hold on a second. I'm an engineer, and by the way, you had to go to college and graduate and all that, and go through an interview process to get a good engineering job. Because $80,000 a year in the early 2000s was good money.
Yes, it was.
You're probably in the 2% category of income earners in the US, right?
Yeah, it wasn't bad. Like we weren't broke, but we weren't saving a lot of money either. Young kids, small family, bought a house. Like we weren't getting massively ahead, and yet we weren't destitute either, right? And so I would say we were solid, like lower white collar, upper blue collar, like income earners at the time.
But there's nothing wrong with that because we all come from somewhere. I actually like to see that.
Yep.
More than you know what, Rob? Now that you mentioned that, you get to see more success stories that are coming from a background like yours or mine.
Yep.
Although we both have different backgrounds, because I grew up in Venezuela, and in South America is a whole different thing over there. But you don't see, or if you see it, is very small. Is the Ivy League kid that had everything on his feet to go be successful. Like, I don't know, like being born in a rich family, and by the way, Rob, here's the Porsche, so you can go to college and and be yours, and have a better car than your friends that are going to. Look, I love stories like yours because there is a truth to what it is of when it comes to growth.
Mm-hmm.
And your story shows growth. You said it. I'm coming from a family that didn't have it all. We were probably barely making ends meet. And our friend David also posted here, Freedom Soft is the best. Rob Swanson does a great job for his clients and users. And we're going to get into that in a minute. Shout out to David. David is my friend as well. But yeah, I want to touch up on your personal story. Let's go back to when you were a teenager, before you went to college.
Yep.
How did that environment look like?
Yeah, so I grew up in a Midwest, West Central Minnesota farming community. My dad owned a fertilizer and chemical business back in the day, so his customers were all farmers. All of the guys that were on the wrestling team with me were all farmers, right? And so it was.
If you hang out with 4 farmers, you're going to be the 5th one, right?
That's right. That's right. So that was it. West Central, Midwest, born and raised, and
how easy was it for you to go to college after you graduated high school? Do you have to? Did your parents help you? Did you
Yep.
pay for your own? Did you get a scholarship?
A little bit of all of it. I found my goal in high school, my senior year of high school, was that other than going to class with my books, and this is not necessarily a good goal, but I think it's kind of a funny goal. I never wanted my books to leave the high school. So what I always tried to do is get everything I needed to do. School just kind of came easy for me, and I just didn't have to work that hard to get decent grades. And so I got a scholarship to go to North Dakota State. And then my parents helped beyond that a little bit. And then I got a job though, right out of, as soon as I got up there, what I tried to figure out how to do at the time, I was thinking I'm going to be an engineer and I'm going to start my own engineering company. So right out of the gates, when I was a freshman in college, I sought out internships and how can I go work for somebody for free and provide value and not worry about how much I get paid, but how can I learn? And so that process landed me a job making $6 an hour in a lab, and then as a technician in an engineering firm in St. Cloud, Minnesota. Okay.
Now, have you read any at that time that you made that decision to go to work for free for somebody? Have you read already some personal development books or something like that maybe you would have picked up that idea, or it was something that just came? You're like, you know what? I'm just gonna go freaking work for Ricardo for free and learn how to do what he does, or you know.
Not really, because again, back, this is the late 80s, early 90s now, and that stuff wasn't that accessible. Like it isn't as accessible as it is today, right? I didn't know that personal development was even a thing. And so, Ricardo, I ended up at this company, and I heard that the big boss, George Klemke was the guy's name, was going to show up at our branch location. And I'm a $6 an hour tech, young college student. And I'm in the back, dirty part of the office building, the lab. And he's up in the fancy offices. And there's probably 3,500 people in this company. And he's the president and CEO, and he's coming to our location. Well, I heard he was coming. And I'm like, I got to meet this guy because I got to know, like, who is he and like, how did he get to where he is? And so when I heard that he had shown up, like everybody in the lab was talking, hey, George is here. George is here. Put on, make sure you're working. George is here. I'm thinking, oh, cool. George is here. So what I did is I left the back of the lab. I walked out to the fancy offices with my dirty work boots and jeans and dirty work t-shirt. And I walked around until I found a guy that I didn't recognize. And big, tall guy, had a suit on, gray hair. I walked up to him and I said, hey, you must be Mr. Klemke. And I put my hand out and I said, my name is Rob. I'm a college student up at North Dakota State University in civil engineering. I just wanted to tell you thank you for the opportunity to work for the company. I heard you were here and I just wanted to shake your hand. That's all I said. And he looks at me and he was like surprised, right? Here's this skinny young kid that walks up to me from the back of the lab. Nobody does that. And I did. And what ended up happening is he knew that I was up at college in North Dakota. And so he called the vice president of operations for North Dakota and said, hey, I don't know who this kid is, but make sure that he works for us for a long time. And so I went back to college and I get a phone call from the HR department of this big engineering firm and said, hey, the vice president, the senior vice president of North Dakota operations is on the line and they'd like to talk to you to have a few minutes to chat. Sure. And so they recruited me and I ended up working with them for a year, all through college and then after college. And then I ultimately left them to move to Denver. And it was through that process that I still felt like I was going to start my engineering company. But then I realized biz dev was it, and my real estate clients were making all the money, and the seminar. And that brings us to this story here today.
Wow. So, okay, that's amazing. And I'm glad you shared that particular part of your life because that shows a lot of character. You know, a lot of people today, they don't understand what it is in investing in
Yeah,
in human or the relationship currency.
that's right.
And that's exactly what you did at the time.
That's right.
You might have done it by you were probably not even intending into doing that, or it just wasn't spontaneous, right? Like,
Yeah,
shoot, I'm just gonna go there, shake this guy's hand, tell him thank you, and boom, away I go.
that was it.
Most people today, if I'm going to, let's say I'm going to talk to you and we're going to do some business or something, or we want to do business one way or another, most people approach their relationship on what can I get out of a Rob?
Right. Right.
How much money can I make off this guy?
Yep.
Or vice versa, right? And
Right.
because I mean, let's face it, everybody's hunting for business, everybody's being a hunter and growing their businesses, and of course,
Yep.
revenue and making money. Money is like oxygen. You know, you can't go without it. You know, unless you're a monk
Right.
or something like that. But
Right.
but a lot of people don't understand the investing in relationships with purpose.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
And I'm glad you touch up on that, because when you were young, you did it unconsciously. That wasn't the conscious mind saying, oh, I'm going to go and shake this guy's hand so I can get a job offer to stay here
Yeah.
for a very long time. And you could have probably stayed there for many years and make a career out of it if you didn't move back to Denver.
Yeah.
Now,
Yep.
you went to this real estate seminar. You got the $45,000 check. You're thinking, man, I'm an engineer. I make 80 some thousand bucks a year. I just made half of my salary on one check.
Yep.
What's next?
Well, what's next is I went home and I told my wife, my young wife, one small kid, maybe another on the way. I think we had a one on the way. I said, hey, I think I'm going to quit and do this real estate thing full time. And she's like, what?
You lost your mind.
You lost your mind. Like, she didn't even understand what it meant. Like, the word entrepreneur back in those days, that wasn't a word that we used. We didn't know. I didn't know that word. And so I told her,
Didn't even know how to write it completely, right.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I still got to go and put entrepreneur. Oh, this is how you write it correctly,
Yeah, exactly. It's a complicated word.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I told her, I said, hey, I think I'm going to quit and do this real estate thing full time. And she said, whoa. Why don't you replace your salary before you do that? And I'm thinking, well, I just did half of it in 45 days. I'm like, okay, I'll take that challenge. And so she gave me the challenge that if I replaced my salary, I could quit my job. Game on. Well, in the next 3 months, I quit my job. And so I had replaced my salary with real estate. And I was doing a variety of things back at that time. I was doing a lot of creative finance deals. So I was buying rentals with creative finance. I was doing sandwich lease options. So I was getting, non-refundable option deposits up front. I was wholesaling. So I was doing a lot of cash generation while I was simultaneously trying to build my cash flow up. And my wife gave me that challenge. 90 days later, I quit my job. And one of the things in transparency that helped me quit my job is I was doing deals, and I kept, back in the day, faxing in checks. I wasn't emailing. I wasn't taking a picture and texting it. I was faxing in a copy of a check to the seminar company. And one day I got a call from them, and they said, hey, if you keep faxing us copies of checks, you're going to break our fax machine. Because I was closing deals.
Wow.
And they said, what are you doing? And I said, well, what do you mean? What am I doing? I'm just doing what you taught me to do.
What you taught me to do. I'm following the recipe.
Yeah. And they said, well, yeah, we know that, but like, what part of what we taught you are you actually doing? Like, I realized at that moment they were teaching a smorgasbord, and they really didn't know what was working at what time of the market cycle in what city. And so, long story short, I ended up joining their team, and I became a coach and a mentor for them in about 2001, so 22 years ago.
Wow.
And here's what was cool about that, Ricardo. What was really neat is that gave me the opportunity to travel the country every other week. I went to a new city. I dropped into that city. I spent 3 to 4 days with a student on the ground, and I helped them launch their business in that city. So from Canada to Mexico, East Coast to West Coast, I saw city after city after city, week after week. And that exposure to different cities and different markets and different neighborhoods is the thing that sort of developed my whole investment thesis and how I invest in real estate today.
Wow. That's a very interesting story. So you became a coach trainer for your mentors, basically.
Yep.
You were one of the few students that actually took action and when they did so, because this is the thing. I see a lot of people sign up for coaching programs just like that one, the one that you came through.
Yep.
And they pay 20, 30, 40, sometimes even $50,000 for it.
Yep.
But I see those coaching programs as universities. Like, why are they a university? Because when you go to college and when you go to university, you just get the material, right? Yep. And then you have to study, then you test on it, you pass, then you graduate. But once you graduate, they say bye.
Right.
There's no accountability.
Yep.
There's no, all right, Rob, did you get your first property yet? Or
yep.
Do you have you done your first wholesale deal, or where are you getting stuck on your first wholesale deal or your first flip or whatever?
Yep.
And a lot of people bash those training programs today because they're just out there to scam you and take your money. No, those are universities. Period. They're giving you the sauce. They give you the steps. Are there programs out there that are trash? Of course there are, but for the majority, programs like the one Ross was running, or Robert Allen, or all these other guys that that been there before we have, are good. And if you just read it, analyze it, don't get stuck on analyzing it and take action, then we're gonna have results like the ones you had. Yep. I started, and I didn't go through any coaching program. I just watched a TV show and I saw a guy flipping a house, and I said, if that guy can do that, I can do it too.
Yes.
And I went and bought my first property. And by the way, you're still going to pay the money. You're just going to choose whether you pay to an educator or you pay to the streets.
That's right.
I pay the streets.
Yeah.
Because on my first deal, man, every thug on the neighborhood came and took my money. Yep. When it came to rehabbing that property. And it was a horrible, horrible feeling. Like, oh my God. And then that's when I said, okay, I understand now why these guys charge what they charge when it comes to real estate education. So how long were you an educator for? Like when like at that particular, because you're still educating, but you do it in a different way.
Yep.
During that stint, how long were you with those guys coaching?
Yeah, so I was with them for about 2 years, give or take, and then there was some internal company conflict that I'm like, guys, I don't need to be a part of this.
Yeah,
and so because at the whole time I was doing that, I was running my real estate business on the side, and like the whole month when I remember this happening, I get a phone call and I'm like, hey, Russ Whitney calls me. Hey, I want you to come down to my house and do this. And, all this stuff. And I'm like, guys, I don't want to get in the middle of this corporate conflict stuff. I just made $60,000 this month in my real estate business. I'm good. Like, I'm just out.
Yeah.
And so I left the coaching gig there, and just went back into full-time now, doing my real estate business and focusing on that.
And you did that for how long before you started developing or getting into the tech side of business and all of these other things?
So at that moment, I had just come off of this 2-year stint where every other week I traveled to a new city, and I began.
So you were working 7 days a week, because from Monday through, well, actually, it was probably Monday through Thursday or Tuesday through Thursday you're doing real estate, and Thursday to Sunday you're doing education, because I know they take the whole weekend.
I mean, ask my wife. I was working 7 days a week, right? And the whole 4-hour work week thing that everybody thinks they can just build this life that they want with no effort. It's not really true. Like, the overnight success has 20 years of
you are a 20+ year overnight success.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So I worked a lot. I was working a lot, but I was building something that I was passionate about, that I felt like it was going to serve my family well. My wife was incredibly supportive. And yet at the same time, I knew that I had to, like, hustle is not the destination. Hustle is a season. And so I was willing to hustle in a season as long as I saw that the destination and where I was trying to head to pulled me out of the hustle, right? And so I tell that to people all the time. Hustle is not your destination. And so to answer your question, I came off this stint traveling the country, seeing different markets, and right at the end of that, I ended up hiring a guy into my real estate business, and he was a systems thinking guy, and he helped me build a technology back in about 2004.
Wow.
So a long time ago. A long time. And we started tracking markets, and we were tracking the performance of markets, because what I started to realize is that, I'll tell you this quick story. I went on a mentoring trip to Tacoma, Washington, and anybody from Tacoma likely knows the hilltop area of Tacoma. It sits up on the plateau, overlooks the harbor. And back when I went there for the first time, it was like in April. A lot of rundown buildings, a lot of boarded up, a lot of abandoned, a lot of distress. A couple of roll-offs, a little bit of investor activity.
Go look at that market today and compare it, right?
Oh, big time. Well, listen to this. So that was April. I went back in October, and in that 6-month window, all of a sudden, there's roll-offs everywhere. There's investors everywhere. There's all this stuff, and properties that were selling for $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 in April were now selling for $90,000, $100,000, $110,000. Like in a 6-month window, we saw like a $70,000 or $80,000 price appreciation. And I thought to myself, if I would have just bought everything 6 months ago, I'd have made millions of dollars. Like, if I would have had the capital to just. And then I started to ask the question, is there a way for me to know that is happening? Like, how would I have known that unless I went to Tacoma as an investor, paid attention to the data, left, came back, paid attention to the data, and saw the difference? I wouldn't know that unless I'm in the local market, and every investor knows it by looking in the rearview mirror. And so what I wanted to figure out is there a way for me to predict with some element of confidence that a market is about to pop? And so we started tracking markets, and we started tracking inventory, and we started tracking price movement at the higher, median, and the lower price points. And we started to build some data algorithm. This is my engineering side of me coming out, right? We started to build some data where we could, with some level of confidence, see a market that was about to pop before it popped.
How do you do this back then? Because today I could say, okay, you get an API and you plug here and you plug there and you plug here and
Yep.
boom, you got all the data and
Yep.
bingo, you got the predictability tool built into whatever you want. But back then there was none of these, a lot of this technology that we have today, or even the data wasn't available like it is today.
Yeah. So what we did a lot of data scraping back in the day, and what's interesting back in that day is the sites that we were doing the data scraping on. They didn't have any technology to block us from scraping the data, so we were able to get the data. Whereas today, that same approach, they would just shut you down instantly
Right.
because they're so much more technically advanced. But that's how we did it back in the day. And like you said, today it's plug in the API and you can have access to it. We were doing it 20 years ago when nobody was thinking about it and so I've invested all over the country, and I made a lot of investing decisions based on that type of data, where I would go into a market, because I always tell people this, Ricardo, all real estate strategies work all the time everywhere, but they work sometimes better in certain locations. And so what I try to do is figure out what market is going to help me the most build wealth, and I try to invest in those markets.
Amazing. So can we say that when you did what you did back then by scraping all this data and putting it all together in one spot, okay, let's call it a server or whatever you want to call it,
Yep.
is this how you started thinking about, I'm going to create a Freedom Soft, or I'm going to get into a CRM model, or into something where I can house things? How do you get to Freedom Soft?
Yeah, good question. So fast forwarding a few years from that data play into 2007, because of that data, I started to feel like I saw all of the markets like screeching to a halt. Like where I saw price movement, where I saw inventory movement, where I saw movement, everything flatlined. And that was in late 2006, early 2007. Like it was from 1 week to the next, all of a sudden, boom, it flat. And
Pull
then
the brakes.
it stayed flat. And I was like, whoa, something is going on and I don't know what it is. This is interesting. And so what I started to do is I sold off a lot of my portfolio at that peak.
Wow, smart man.
Yeah.
Smart man.
So it worked because the data, I didn't understand it, but the data said something is up.
Yeah, you didn't know what was coming, but there were red flags everywhere you looked.
Exactly. And so
I'm seeing those red flags right now, by the way.
Yeah.
In many places.
Yes. I don't disagree. So it was Tacoma, Washington. It was the data, and 2006 when I saw that flat line. And then August 13th, 2007 is the day Wall Street stopped buying the debt. And that is the day that everything began to go into motion to crash. And so as the markets were beginning to go into a free fall, I said, this is an opportunity. And so I raised a large capital fund with a group out of Stamford, Connecticut. I pulled in a lot of capital, private money. We put a big fund together and we just started buying real estate. I went through that process, and I'm going to accelerate through that story. We can always go back if you want, but I want to get to the Freedom Soft.
I feel like we're going to have to do a couple of series on this because you have a lot to talk about. And so, if we have to stop, no big deal. We'll loop it around on the next one.
Yeah, that's totally cool. So happy to come back and talk with you again, Ricardo, because this is super fun. I love telling the story because it just gets people's wheels thinking. And I'm a normal dude. Like there's nothing special about me. Like I'm a normal dude, like every guy or gal listening to this. Anybody can do what I did. I got nothing.
Actually, and I met you now, 3-4 years ago, maybe longer. I'm not sure, but I would never thought that you walking around the hotel lobby would have owned and would have done everything that you have, because you dress down. You're always on flip flops. You're always on Bermudas. You're always with facial hair. Depending on how long you want to keep it or how short. You're a very relatable person. It's like it's almost like you're very open to when it comes to shaking somebody's hand and saying what's up, whether it's somebody with a lot of experience or just the new guy that just started. So
Yeah.
And I love stories like yours, especially that 2007 part that you're talking about, predicting and being able to read red flags. You're like,
Yeah.
I don't know what the hell is happening here right now, but the market has pulled brakes on us.
Yeah.
I better stop. And then you're like, okay, you know what? Let me liquidate.
Yep.
By the way, Wall Street quit buying debt. Oh, hold on a second. Let's go pull a bunch of money together because there's about to be bloods on the streets.
Yep.
I wish I would have been in real estate at the time.
Yeah.
I got in real estate a year afterwards. In 2008 is when I started, investigating on it. And I did buy some cheap properties, but I think in a lot of our friends in common, they lost their asses in 2008. They got completely wiped out because they never pulled the brakes, even though they saw the red flags. They had built a monster that they had to keep fed. And in order to keep that monster fed, they had to continue to buy and buy and buy and buy and buy. And
that's right.
Now they got caught up in the middle of the mess.
Yep. Yeah, exactly right. And so what I saw was, so I went out to lunch with a hard money guy here in Denver, Bernie, and Bernie was just an old chain smoking, hard money notes guy in Denver. And I said, "Hey, Bernie, what do you think's happening? Like, this is early 2008. Like, what's going on?" And he looked at me and he said, "Look, kid, here's what you do. You take all the money that you got in this fund you're putting together and you go buy everything you can get your hands on. You disconnect the utilities, you board them up, you rehab them as you can get to them, and you wait." And this is what he said: "Because the market will make you more wealth than you could ever work to create."
Because of the swinging effect.
Because of the swing. And he said, we're in that moment. And, and this was my response. And I didn't understand the response at the time. I said, "But Bernie, this feels different. Like Lehman Brothers is going out. AIG is collapsing. Bear Stearns is going under. Like there's financial distress everywhere, right?" And I said, "Bernie, this just feels different." And he looks at me and he goes, "What do you know about feeling different?" He goes, "I went through it in 1973, 74. I went through it in 1990, 91. He goes, 2008, 9, it's exactly the same thing with a little different catalyst that got us here. He goes, "I'm telling you what to do. Go do it." And you know what I didn't do? I call it my $30 million mistake, Ricardo, because I didn't do what Bernie told me to do. What I did is I pulled that money together and we bought and we flipped and we bought and we flipped. So we bought, rehabbed, and flipped. The first month we put the fund together, we bought 22 houses, and then we just ramped up from there. And we bought a ton. We made a ton of money. But I should have bought and held everything, because the market would have made me way more money than all of this good operational efficiency and rehab strategy that we put into place. We made a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. We would have made exponentially more with a fraction of the effort had I listened to Bernie.
Wow, that's crazy, man. I wish I would have been in the real estate business way before I got into it. But I was serving in the military in between 2001 and 2005, so I had very little chance of doing that, because I was in the Navy on a boat somewhere in the middle of the water, and I just couldn't go see properties or anything like that. But afterwards I did it, and I don't regret any of it. I had my ups and downs, but I know you have a hard stop, Rob. And what I want to do is I want to thank you for being here today. We got to do another one, because I don't think we're even halfway through the interview. We have to come back and do another one. So I'm gonna make sure.
Because I didn't answer your question on how we got to FreedomSoft. So maybe round 2 we'll pick up there, and I'll answer that question.
We'll leave that loop open, and I'll make sure we schedule with Mary Angel maybe next week, and we'll come back around and we'll go from there.
Love to.
Brother, thank you so much for being here today. Guys, you guys got to pay attention to this interview. This is somebody with real life experience, 20 plus years in the real estate business. He's also got a tech company and multiple other things that we didn't even get into, the airplanes and flying and doing all these crazy things that you do, man. I love it. Don't forget to share, hit share, like, and subscribe. People, find Rob Swanson, find FreedomSoft, check out his CRM. We will be focusing on that second part of the interview on the next call. By the way, Attend Growth is in Houston next week, January 26th and the 27th. You need to make sure you get your tickets. They're going up in price. VIP is almost sold out. And I'm looking forward to see you on the next one. Thank you so much, Rob.